The Haunted Castle of Transylvania. Now there is only ice and mist everywhere. Mina is no longer an ordinary human. Dracula's ancient curse flows in her blood, making her immortal but alone. Mina stands on the castle balcony. The howling of wolves can be heard below. She spends time in Dracula's old library and reads his diary. She realizes that Dracula was not actually a monster. He was a lover who became a victim of circumstances. Many centuries ago, at that time, Dracula was Prince Andrei, a heroic warrior. He had married Elizabeth for love, who looked exactly like Mina, and whom he loved more than his own life. Since Andrei was extremely wise and brave, almost everyone honored and respected him. His enemies were always jealous of him and were obsessed with thoughts of how to harm him. Once, during a war when Andrei won against his enemies, the enemy side played a cunning trick as they could not kill him directly. They sent an opposing princess named Olivia to Andrei's camp as a captive for a peace treaty. Andrei kept her only as a hostage so that the enemies would surrender. But the enemy's spies sent news to Elizabeth that, after winning the war, Andrei has fallen in love with that princess and is going to marry her and put her on the throne. But Elizabeth did not believe it. She continued to wait for Andrei. In the meantime, a clever messenger of the enemies brought a forged letter and a locket to Elizabeth, which was the symbol of their love. He said that Andrei had gifted this locket to that princess and had forgotten Elizabeth. The messenger arranged the evidence in such a way that Elizabeth was forced to think that her life's sacred love was actually a lie. Elizabeth saw from a distance that Andrei's army was returning, and right behind Andrei's horse, that opposing princess was sitting in a royal carriage. She believed everything to be true. A single sound kept echoing in her eyes, face, and heart, that Andrei had betrayed her. He had cheated her. The closer Andrei came to the castle, the more worthless life seemed to Elizabeth. Out of wounded pride and insult, she became like a mad person. She wrote a note. "Andrei, you defeated the enemy with the sword, but you defeated me with betrayal. If your love for me does not exist in this world, then I have no need for this life." When Andrei was entering through the castle gate, at that very moment, Elizabeth went and stood at the highest peak of the castle. Andrei saw her and screamed, trying to stop her, but by then it was too late. Elizabeth committed suicide by jumping into the turbulent river. When Elizabeth's lifeless body was pulled from the water, Andrei stood stunned. The opposing princess then revealed the truth, that it was a conspiracy. Andrei realized that his own rage and the enemy's plot had snatched everything from him. Seeing Elizabeth's lifeless body, he broke down. People around began to say, since Elizabeth committed suicide, her soul would go to hell and she would never find heaven. Andrei became furious. He shouted, "The one he protected all his life, God snatched her away. When there is no justice for his love, he does not accept that God's rule." He began to kill people indiscriminately, one after another with his sword. Because of this, a shadow of a curse descended upon him. He would live forever as an immortal, yes, but he would remain completely lonely and solitary. He would scream in agony forever until he found the reflection of Elizabeth. And when he found her completely, the ultimate end of his life would occur. But Andrei, instead of being repentant, began to laugh loudly. That laugh was a terrifying laugh of mockery. In this way, he turned from Andrei into Dracula. Dracula knew that he was immortal, but this immortality was actually a captivity. According to folklore, the woman who loved Dracula in her previous birth, only she can give Dracula liberation. Mina was that reincarnation of Elizabeth whom Dracula was searching. When Dracula was in London, he was wandering around, hiding his existence in the crowd. For hundreds of years he had been searching for Elizabeth's soul, but every time he had failed. But when he first saw Mina at Lucy's grave, he felt a strange pain and agony in his heart. It felt to him as if hundreds of knives had pierced his heart. Dracula was watching Mina's way of standing, the way she tied her hair. Everything was like Elizabeth, but he did not want to believe it just by looking at the face. He tried to enter deep into Mina's soul. When Mina slept at night, Dracula would enter her room as mist. He would enter Elizabeth's memories into Mina's dreams, and he saw that in her dreams, Mina was talking about all those places where she had never been, that ancient castle of Transylvania, that red palash, Raktapalash, tree. In her sleep, Mina would utter a name. It was Andre. Dracula realized that it was not just a resemblance of the face. Inside Mina's body lived Elizabeth's old soul, which was waiting for him across time. In this way, he had found Mina, and through the course of events, he had to accept his ultimate fate, death, and gained liberation from the cursed life. But though that death freed Dracula's mortal body, it could not free his soul. His immense love for Mina and the agony he received without any fault kept him imprisoned in an eternal darkness. For 100 years, his soul has pleaded within the walls of that worn-out palace for a little peace, for that magical touch of Mina. Currently, when Mina watches these scenes in an old diary or a magic mirror while sitting in the castle, she understands. Dracula drank blood not just to survive, but to quench that eternal agony inside him. He hated the world because the world had deprived him of his love. Mina sometimes stands in front of a giant mirror in the castle. She cannot see her own reflection in the mirror, but slowly Elizabeth's figure emerges from within it. Elizabeth wants to tell Mina something, but Mina cannot hear anything. She only sees Elizabeth's tears falling as blood. When Dracula appears as a shadow in Mina's imagination, he says, "Do you know, Mina, century after century, I have only searched for that thirst in your eyes. Elizabeth loved me because I was pure, but you love me because you have recognized my darkness. God had cursed me, but you set me free." Mina signs an old gold locket. Opening the locket reveals a picture of Elizabeth inside. When Mina touches the locket, she can feel Elizabeth's memories. She sees a strange scene, that tragic night of Elizabeth's suicide. She feels as if Elizabeth's last breath still lingers inside Mina even today. Mina keeps saying, "Am I just her illusion then? Or am I her myself?" She realizes that her coming to this castle was no accident. It was an incomplete destiny from her past life. And it truly wasn't an accident. She could not forget Dracula's pitiful face in any way. She could feel the wailing of Dracula's unsatisfied soul in her own heart. One crimson night, an ancient book of shadows fell into Mina's hands. It was written there, "Only if a pure soul sacrifices a part of their own life can a cursed soul be freed or attain rebirth." Mina decided she would absolutely free Dracula from this hellish agony. Late at night, Mina went alone to Dracula's grave. She had no torch in her hand, only a candle and the blood from her own hand. Reciting a special spell, she cut the palm of her hand and touched that blood to Dracula's stone coffin. Mina kept saying, "You gave up immortality for me. Today I sacrificed a part of my ordinary life for you. Come back, not for me, but to fulfill the incompleteness of our love." An unimaginable scene. On that new moon night, rain poured from the breaking sky, and a strange blue lightning crashed down from the sky onto Dracula's old tomb. The sound of a deep sigh floated up from deep within the earth. Drawn by that love which had remained unfulfilled, he came back to life once again. Slowly, the stone coffin moved aside. Dracula opened his eyes again, but these eyes were not ferocious like before. Rather, they were blue with sorrow. No monster emerged from the coffin. By the touch of Mina's blood, Dracula awoke in the guise of an entirely ordinary human. Mina brought him back to life indeed, but in exchange, Mina slowly began to lose her own life force. After the coffin's lid slid away, Dracula slowly sat up. Mina looked at him with a pale face and tear-filled eyes. She had hoped Dracula would embrace her the moment he saw her, but Dracula just remained still, staring at Mina. That familiar depth in Dracula's eyes had vanished. He was looking at Mina as if he were seeing an unfamiliar person. Those hundreds of years of memories, those moments spent with Mina, everything seemed erased from his mind. Even though his soul returned in the process of resurrection, his memories did not return. Mina called out in a trembling voice, "Count, can't you recognize me? I am your Mina." Dracula gave no answer. He just started looking in amazement at the dusty walls around him and at his own hands. To him, this world, this body, everything seemed new. Dracula finally spoke, but his voice was mechanical and cold. He only asked, "Who am I, and who are you? Why is a strange emptiness working in my heart?" Mina realized Dracula had returned indeed, but an eternal silence remained within him. This person standing before her felt like an unknown shadow, in whose heart there was no pulse for Mina, only a massive emptiness. Dracula woke up as a new man to whom all memories of Mina are today but incinerated history. Mina gave him life with her blood indeed, but that ever-familiar love of Dracula has vanished like fog today. Dracula stepped down from the coffin with slow steps and advanced towards the window. Outside, the black clouds of the new moon still loomed. He kept looking at the sky, as if trying to recognize his own existence. Mina was not ready to give up. Trembling, she went and stood near Dracula. In her hand was that gold locket which Dracula had gifted to Mina. Mina held the locket up in front of Dracula's eyes and said, "Look at this locket. Doesn't it awaken any tremor in your mind? You said that even death could not separate us. Today I stand before you holding this memory given by you. Just look at me." Dracula looked at the locket. Suddenly a crease appeared on his forehead. The pupils of his eyes began to tremble. Mina's voice was knocking on some locked door deep within his brain. He felt as though he was standing in the middle of a vast sea of fog, and someone was calling him from afar, but he could not pierce through that fog in any way. Suddenly, Dracula screamed in agony and clutched his head. A fierce conflict began inside his body between Mina's pure blood and his primal soul. He pushed Mina away, not out of hate, but because of the unbearable pain happening inside him. Dracula said, "Stop. These memories are piercing my head like arrows. I do not know who you are, but your presence is scorching me. Leave me alone." Dracula ran away towards the dark corridors of that ruined palace. Mina collapsed onto the floor. She realized that Dracula had indeed returned, but he was now engaged in a war with his own memories. Mina would not leave him alone. She decided that no matter how far Dracula went, she would remain his shadow until Dracula's forgotten love awakened again. After Dracula fled, a terrifying silence descended upon the palace. Mina picked up the gold locket lying on the floor. Her body was growing increasingly weak because she had spent a large portion of her life force to awaken Dracula. Dracula is hiding in the corner of a dark room in the palace. He saw that the skin of his body was slowly becoming transparent, and some ancient letters were emerging there. These were the effects of Mina's magical spell. Whenever he closed his eyes, there floated into his mind a garden, a cheerful woman, and a pair of blood-stained hands. He could not understand if these were his own memories or someone else's. Suddenly, Dracula felt a gentle beating inside his chest. He was dead. He wasn't supposed to have a heart. He realized this wasn't his own heart. This was Mina's heartbeat that had been transmitted into his body. Whenever he moved away from Mina, his own existence seemed to fade. They were now tied by an invisible thread. Dracula left the palace and went out towards the forest outside. He is no longer swift like before, but rather weak like a human to some extent. Mina started following him from a distance. She is not standing in front of him because she knows Dracula will flee from Mina now. She just kept moving forward by following the footprints left behind by Dracula. Reaching the edge of the forest, Dracula came and stood in front of a giant lake. In the moonlight, he saw his own reflection in the water, but surprisingly, he did not see himself alone in the water's reflection. In the reflection, Mina was standing beside him, although Mina was hiding behind the bushes behind him. Dracula looked back in shock and shouted, "Who are you? Why won't you stop following me like a shadow? Why does this new life of mine feel incomplete without your existence?" When Dracula's shout broke the silence of the forest, then Mina slowly emerged from behind the trees. In the moonlight, she looked like an unearthly goddess. Her tears were in her eyes. She said in a calm voice, "I am not your shadow. I am that past of yours that you have forgotten. I am that thirst of yours that cannot be quenched with blood. It can only be quenched with love." Dracula wanted to be angry, but he couldn't. He felt that the closer Mina came, the faster his heartbeat grew. He could not understand why the tears of this unfamiliar girl were piercing his chest like arrows. Mina came and stood right in front of Dracula and placed her hand on Dracula's chest. Mina saying, "This new life of yours was gained in exchange for my life. My blood is now flowing in your body, so even if I am far away, you will feel me, because we are now one soul." Dracula started. He understood why he was feeling the emptiness, but he could not accept it. He pushed Mina away and began to cry profusely. Mina received a tremendous blow to her heart and kept burning in agony. Just then, the sound of heavy boots was heard tearing through the darkness of the forest. Holding an ancient hunting sword in his hand, Jonathan Harker came and stood in front. But there is no longer that human nobility in his appearance. His two eyes are red like burning fire, and black veins are floating up through his pale skin. Saying this as Jonathan prepared to erase the last trace of Dracula with his sharp sword or hunting weapon, at that very moment, Mina stood between Dracula and Jonathan. Her two arms were outstretched, a steady resolve in her eyes. Jonathan, stunned, said, "Mina, move away. He is a curse, a ghoul. You are making the same mistake again. Don't you know how he destroyed our lives?" Mina said in a calm but firm voice, "I know, Jonathan, but what I see today makes you seem more terrifying than Dracula. In the intoxication of revenge, you have lost your conscience." Jonathan screams, "You are protecting him? The one who wanted to gift you darkness? Mina, this monster is not worthy of mercy." He tries to push Mina aside by her shoulders, but Mina is as unyielding as stone. Jonathan froze. The tip of his sword trembled just inches away from Mina's chest. Taking advantage of this obstacle from Mina, Dracula vanished into the mist and fled. After Dracula fled, the silence that fell there was as horrific as a graveyard. Jonathan threw his sword on the floor. The echo of the metallic sound pierced Mina's ears more than the sword itself. After Dracula fled and reached London, he has no past memories. He does not know who he was or why Mina had protected him. To him, the world is now just blurred images and a primal thirst for blood. Dracula has taken shelter in an elite but abandoned mansion in London. He stood before a giant mirror, but there is no reflection. He tried to touch the mirror with his hand. Dracula began to think to himself, "Who am I? What is this language of fire in my eyes? Why do the alleys of this city seem familiar, yet I can remember nothing?" Suddenly, a blurred image floated in his head, a woman's hand protecting him. He clutched his head in pain. There are no memories, but an unearthly pull remains in his heart. On this side, Mina realized her time was running out, so she decided she wanted to spend her remaining time with Dracula. She knew Dracula would go to London, so Mina also set out for London. Meanwhile, under London's Westminster Bridge, in the thick fog, Dracula stands leaning his back against a wall, wounded. Dark blood is dripping from his chest, and an agitated London crowd is searching for Dracula with torches. They think Dracula is a foreign curse. He cannot understand why this unfamiliar city hates him so much. Dracula shuddered, looking at his own bloody hands. Even without memories, he can feel that he is not someone normal. He cries out in agony, "If I am indeed a monster, then I have no right to live. These people are right. I am a curse." He wanted to break the window glass and tear open his own chest to end this pain. At that very moment, Mina came running forward. She is extremely weak, coughing up blood, but the fire of resolve is in her eyes. As Dracula was about to end himself, Mina gripped his hand tightly. Mina said, "Stop. You call yourself a monster because you are seeing yourself in the mirror of humans, but look into my eyes. I don't see any monster. I see someone who has been waiting for just a little love for 1,000 years." Suddenly, a burning torch came flying through the window towards them. A group of frenzied people are coming to attack them. Mina has no weapon, only her own frail body as Dracula's only protective shield. Mina screams at the crowd, "Get back! The one you have come to kill has done you no harm. You fear the darkness, but the real darkness is in your hearts, which wants to burn a helpless man to death without judging him." Hearing Mina's weak but steady voice, the crowd froze for a moment. They had never seen such fire in the eyes of a dying woman before. When the crowd retreated, Mina fell into Dracula's arms in exhaustion. Dracula sat on the floor holding her. Mina's hot breath is touching Dracula's ice-cold neck. After that turbulent night in London, they took shelter in a secluded Victorian garden house far from the city. Mina and Dracula are alone in a corner of an old library room. The room is packed with books, and the gentle light from the fireplace makes the room magical. Dracula's wounds haven't healed yet. Mina is very carefully tying bandages on his wounds with linen cloth. Dracula is staring at Mina's face with a fixed gaze. As Mina works very close to him, Dracula gently held her hand. He whispered, "That day you put your chest forward and protected me from that frenzied crowd. Am I truly that precious to you? I am but a shadow with no identity." Mina looked into Dracula's eyes, touched his chin gently, and said, "I never saw you as an immortal monster. To me, you are that prince who lost his empire and now has taken shelter in my heart." Outside, it is drizzling. Mina took Dracula's hand and brought him to the window. The dim lights of London can be seen in the distance. Suddenly, Dracula placed his hand on Mina's waist and pulled her very close. Mina looked into his eyes in surprise. Dracula pressed his forehead against Mina's. Mina felt that Dracula's body was no longer ice cold like before. A strange warmth was mixed in his touch. Dracula whispered, "Something is thumping beneath my chest." He gently placed Mina's hand over his heart. Mina is feeling the echo of Dracula's life. Mina felt that Dracula's body was no longer ice cold like a dead man. The warmth of Mina's life seemed to be infecting his frozen body. Over the next few days, Mina began teaching Dracula how to live like a human. Dracula never used to watch sunsets, but Mina sat with him by the window to watch the colors of dusk. She used to read poetry.
One day, Dracula brought a red rose from the garden for Mina. His finger was bleeding from the thorn, but there was a shy smile on his face. He tucked the rose into Mina's hair. Dracula's blood was dripping steadily from his finger. Mina shuddered, but immediately she was stunned by a strange sight. Dracula is not looking at his wound, he is looking at Mina's face, as if for the first time he has been able to become a part of something beautiful in the world. Mina quickly took Dracula's hand in her two hands. She wanted to wipe the blood from Dracula's finger with her veil, but Dracula gently stopped her. Looking at his bloody finger in a strange trance, Dracula said, "Mina, I didn't know there could be such a strange satisfaction even in pain. Today, when the thorn pricked me while picking the rose, I felt for the first time that I am alive. This blood, it isn't just red, it is warm. Am I truly becoming human, Mina?" Mina kissed Dracula's finger gently. A drop of her tear merged with Dracula's blood. She said in a tearful voice, "To become human doesn't just require blood, Count. It requires the ability to shed blood for others. Today, you shed your own blood for me. That is your greatest identity." Dracula embraced Mina. To the memoryless Dracula, there is no longer any greed for an empire's throne. He touched his warm lips to Mina's forehead. In this touch, there was no longer any demonic curse. There was a primal and unadulterated purity. Dracula whispered into Mina's ear, "If returning memories means returning to that life of hatred, then I wish never to remember anything. I want to remain forever imprisoned within this small garden house and your love." At that very moment, the bell of a distant church rang out, and in the sound of that bell, a shadow of pain suddenly appeared in Dracula's eyes. Someone is striking hard at the locked doors of his memoryless brain. Mina realized that these days of happiness are perhaps starting to crumble like a dam of sand. Dracula, in a tottering state, leaned against a stone statue in the garden. His pupils of his eyes are trembling, and his voice is changing, becoming deep and grave again. Dracula began to mutter, "Sword, blood, screams. I am no garden owner, Mina. I am the cause of hundreds of people's deaths. My hands are soaked in blood." He looked at Mina, but that shyly smiling prince was no longer there. In his eyes was now emerging the memory of 1,000 years of cruel arrogance and loneliness. Mina embraced Dracula from behind. She tried to calm Dracula with all her strength. "No, that wasn't you. That was a curse. Dracula, look at me. You are free now. Don't let your memories consume you." As Mina embraced him, he realized her breath was becoming increasingly heavy. He can feel that Mina's life force is moving into his body through an invisible pull. The ice in his body is melting into blood. His heart is beating for the first time, but for every beat, Mina has to give a drop of blood. Dracula was horrified to see Mina's pale face. He wanted to let go of Mina's hand and move away, but Mina held him tightly. Dracula cried out in agony, "Mina, let go. I understand what is happening. The more life I get back, the more you are moving toward death. Nature is playing a cruel game with us. This becoming human of mine is actually a stolen part of your life." Exhausted, Mina rested her head on Dracula's chest. Her lips are turning blue, but that immortal smile is on her face. She said in a tearful voice, "If my breath makes your heart functional, then I have no regret in that death. You were a dead stone for 1,000 years, Count. I only wanted to give you the feeling of being alive at least once before I bid farewell to the world." At that very moment, the iron gate of the garden house broke with a loud noise. Jonathan stood in front with a silver sword in his hand and wrath like a volcano in his eyes. He saw Mina turning pale and Dracula seemingly sucking the life out of Mina. He did not know that Mina was giving it voluntarily. Jonathan roared, "Step away, Mina. That ghoul's illusion is finishing you bit by bit. Didn't I say he would never change?" Saying this, Jonathan rushed toward Dracula with his sword. Mina did not let go of Dracula, but rather embraced him even more tightly. The sharp tip of Jonathan's sword became fixed just inches away from Mina's back. Mina did not move. Instead, her body became still and slumped over Dracula's chest. Her pupils of her eyes are fixed. Her lips are blue. She is sinking into a long sleep after pouring the last drop of her life into Dracula's heart. Jonathan lowered his sword and screamed. He saw Mina held in Dracula's arms like a pale idol. His impression was that Dracula was attacking Mina, but the scene was completely the opposite. Mina seemed to be vanishing while protecting Dracula. Jonathan said in a tearful voice, "Mina, what have you done? You gave away your soul like this. I came to protect you, but I didn't realize that you had already surrendered yourself to another world." Mina looked at Jonathan with half-closed eyes. Meanwhile, Mina's still body is held in Dracula's arms. At that very moment when the last bit of life force from Mina's body reached Dracula's brain, the locked doors of his memory began to break one by one. Like a lightning strike, the dark history of hundreds of years flashed before his eyes. Dracula placed his hand on Mina's cheek and cried out in agony, "Why, Mina? Why did you do the same thing again? You gave your life for me once centuries ago, and today you are vanishing yourself to make me human? I don't want this freedom if your breath is not there." Dracula took that red rose in his hand, whose thorns were stained with his blood. He saw that the rose was now turning into ash. Dracula realized that if he accepts this gift from Mina, he will indeed live as a human, but in an eternal loneliness. He brought his mouth close to Mina's ear and began to recite a strange mantra which he had learned over the hundreds of years of his ghoul life. He drew a mark on Mina's forehead with his own blood. Dracula said, "You wanted to make me human, Mina, but I cannot be human without you. Come, let us both leave the boundaries of this world and go to a place where there is no identity, no curse." The footsteps of the torch-bearing people from outside reached the door. They broke the door and entered, but what they saw stunned them. There is no monster, no bloodshed. They saw Mina and Dracula sleeping peacefully, embracing each other by the window. The spray of rain is soaking them. There is a dried rose in each of their hands. Dracula has sacrificed his regained human life to embrace death together with Mina. He has chosen death not as an immortal ghoul, but as Mina's lover. In the foggy sky of London, a sound keeps ringing. Immortality does not reside in blood. Immortality resides in the courage to be able to die for someone by loving them.